Welcome your host for this evening, Crystal Ness.
Hi, welcome everybody. My name's Crystal. I am the events manager within the Alumni Relations Office. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all here tonight for this wonderful panel event. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome all of these panellists that are here with me. Thank you. You'll notice that we currently have one spare chair, so those of you that are familiar with the lineup, the bill is for James Hogarth at BBC Radio Humberside to join us too. James is a producer and a presenter. He produces the show that finishes at 6 o'clock. He was going to disappear early for our sake. Unfortunately, his presenter has called in sick, so James is presenting right up until 6 o'clock, and then he's coming here, so please do forgive him, excuse him when he comes on. We won't draw attention to his arrival, or we could all spontaneously erupt in applause if we think that's appropriate, whichever way. We'll see how the mood takes us when he gets here. In the meantime, we will carry on, so there should be drinks and nibbles on each of your tables. It's a very informal event. It's the business of football. It's a football event, so naturally it's a 90-minute event split into two 45-minute halves. The first 45 minutes will be introductions from our panellists, so we'll talk about their history, their experiences here at the University of Hull, how that got them to where they are in their careers now. And then for the second 45 minutes, we'll open up the floor to anybody in the audience to ask your questions. And please don't be polite. Okay, so I'll probably just start, Ben, if you would, and we'll just go down and just do some introductions, what you studied, when you were here, and where you work now.
Sure. Well, firstly, good evening, everyone. So yeah, as Crystal said, my name's Ben Napper. I am currently the loan manager at Arsenal Football Club. I studied here back in 2005, did a 3-year undergrad in sports coaching and performance, so graduated in 2008, and then actually embarked on a postgrad MRes in physiology, but then kind of quickly managed to, or sort of got a job that made it very difficult to sort of continue, so in the end I unfortunately had to concede that, but yeah, did just over 3 years here, really fond memories. And yeah, certainly played a big part in kind of helping launch my career, I suppose.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. That's some introduction to follow, so thanks for that. My name's Frankie, so I'm currently head of fitness at Middlesbrough Football Club. I studied here in 2007. I did an undergrad in sport and exercise science, and then I followed that with a master's in exercise physiology, which was a research-based master's in conjunction with Hull City Youth Team at the time. Obviously, the studies that I did at the University of Hull did open many doors for me, and I think it's about taking opportunities whilst you're on the course and trying to get as much experience as you can alongside your studies to make you as employable as you can when those opportunities come along. But looking forward to speaking a little bit more about that and answering questions that you guys have towards the end.
Right, we'll test if the second microphone works now. Hi guys, I'm Liam Dooley, I'm the COO of Sheffield Wednesday Football Club. I was actually here at the exact same time as Ben, between 2005 and 2008, and unlike the other two guys, my degree was completely different. I did politics, philosophy and economics, and then somehow ended up in the world of football, so we'll probably go into that a little bit more as we move on, but thank you.
So hi everyone, I'm Sophie, I'm the Sport Development Manager here at Hull Sport. So I didn't actually study here, so I studied at Sheffield Hallam and I did sport development with coaching, but everything that I learned on my degree has helped me get to where I am today. So I'm sure that we'll go into that a little bit soon.
So we will continue without James. I think actually when he arrives, a spontaneous eruption of applause is probably the way that we'll go with that. So, oh, he's here. There we go. Thank you so much, James, for joining us. I realise I'm putting you entirely on the spot because you've literally just sat down, but it was the perfect timing. We are just doing a basic introduction. If you wouldn't mind just telling everybody what's your name and where you come from. Blue mic, thank you.
Well, hello everyone. I'm literally come off air from BBC Radio Humberside, so if you were listening on the way here, it was me you heard. I must apologise for my voice, by the way, because I'm recovering from this flu bug that's going around. So after 4 hours of being on air covering for someone with flu, I'm starting to feel it a little bit. I actually feel like a bit of a fraud being here, because not only did I not attend this university, although I am from Hull, I didn't even go to university. So I'm kind of coming here with literally no academic background, but I've come in here, I guess, with a more vocational background. So I started with BBC Radio Humberside, or the BBC, in 1999. I was about 17, 18, and quite literally started as a tea boy, so making teas and coffees on a Sunday afternoon for a friend of mine who was the presenter that day. And within a couple of months, I'd broadened it out to doing some stuff during the week and working on sports coverage, initially as a volunteer, and then I picked up a few casualing shifts in and around that. And from then on, I worked my way through the system. I've worked for pretty much all of the BBC local radio stations in the Lincolnshire and Yorkshire region, both as a producer and a presenter. I've contributed to a game show on BBC One in the past, done a sort of variety of different things. I've been a music manager and responsible for the music output at BBC Radio Humberside for some time. So I've kind of got a real broad experience really of the last 20 odd years, but unfortunately I can't give you any academic experience. It's all learned on the job, if that's okay with everyone.
Well, you say that, but you're actually responsible for helping me get my Law for Journalists module when I was at university, because you helped me out when I came to visit BBC Radio Humberside, so I'll accredit you with some of my degree. I'll share it.
That's fine. I'll
Yeah.
tell my parents, they'll be grateful.
Yeah, sure.
Finally, I've got an academic background as well as a vocational
I just apologise I didn't invite you
one.
to graduation. But,
That's fine. That's fine. I don't have the student debt that went with it, so
no, that's true.
It's
I'm
a
more
relief.
than happy to share that. Okay, so we'll kind of go back down the line again, if we will. And I imagine that the questions that we're going to get from the audience are going to be more to do with your careers where you are currently. So what I'd quite like to do is touch upon more of your time when you were here, and perhaps what, for those of you that studied here, primarily this question, what drew you to choose the University of Hull, how you became to be a graduate of this particular university?
Oh, it's a good question. So for me, I remember sort of visiting this university on an open day, and there's a few sort of criteria that I guess that I'd sort of had in my mind that I wanted to find a university that aligned with that. So the first one was that I wanted to be a decent distance from home. I didn't want to be go to a university that was local, so I'm from sort of South Manchester. So I knew I wanted to be a good sort of couple of hours at least away, just to sort of get the full experience, I suppose. And then the other thing that I really liked was that it was a campus university, so I didn't kind of fancy trekking around the city from lecture to lecture. That just wasn't something that appealed to me. So that was the two sort of basic criteria. And then obviously I knew the course that I wanted to study, and this university offered it at the time, and it's amazing. So we've just had a real tour around the whole campus, and I've literally not been back here since I graduated. I've done a couple of events for the university, but they were online during COVID, so this is the first chance I've had to see it. And it's changed so much. But at the time, it was things like the biomechanics lab that really sort of drew me to the university. That was sort of quite a new facility that was amazing. And that sort of sold it for me, really. So that was probably some of the underpinning rationale behind my decision. And yeah, I just loved it, to be honest. From the minute we were here, it just felt a really friendly, nice sort of university to be at. It had everything that we needed here. You know, it was back in the day when the Lawns was still around, and you know, I used to live there and jump on the 105, I think it was, that used to bring us to campus. So yeah, that was kind of the journey. And then yeah, the undergrad that I was studying, you know, the key when I look back was just the opportunities that the university afforded me that were not necessarily completely contained within the course. There was additional things that university sort of opened up for us, and you know, it required students at the time to be proactive and sort of go and hunt those down and show willing, but the university were great in providing those. And I just look back and think, you know, that thankfully I managed to make some smart decisions and some good relationships with people in the department, in the faculty that probably helped, and for sure I think that those additional opportunities definitely were the difference maker for me in terms of helping give me a platform to move into the applied world in an industry that, you know, is very competitive. A lot of people want to work in football for obvious reasons. It's quite or certainly perceived as quite a glamorous industry, even though you know, I can assure you that the novelty definitely wears off at times. But yeah, it was definitely those additional opportunities that were key, and that would be my, I guess, biggest piece of advice would be, you know, it's imperative that you don't just leave university with a degree. You know, you have to really chase down those additional opportunities, experiences, relationships, because they all matter, and that's what's really going to make the difference for you when you start to transition into the working world.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd probably echo some of Ben's words. I think one thing for me was the university is quite stunning. I think it's a beautiful university, and that was something that appealed to me. I am from Hull, so coming to a university at home was something that I wanted to do as well. It allowed me to pick up additional work alongside that as well. So it was quite a straightforward choice for me. I think the facilities at the time you had maybe one or two universities that were industry leading, but in terms of the ones next in the pack, it was really good, and it probably had, you know, I think it was top 5 at the time for sport and exercise science facilities. So with it being my hometown university and with the facilities that were available, it was a bit of a no-brainer really. And I think that it was probably, what year did you do your degree?
2005.
2005. So I think it was probably your cohort that, in terms of these additional opportunities that were available, it was probably Ben's cohort that kind of were trailblazing in that, if you will. So I think within your year, you had people at Scunthorpe, Grimsby, Hull. So obviously we knew about this, and we knew that the university were keen to allow students to have these experiences and these opportunities. So I think that was a real selling point for me, because I knew that, or I had an idea that I would like to work in football, but I also knew that the opportunities needed to be there. And like I say, with Benji, you've probably been the first ones to actually go out and get applied experience alongside the invaluable knowledge that was based through the degree. I think that probably was a big sell for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think from my point of view, I'm quite opposite to Ben in this regard, in that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I knew I should really go to university, but no one from my village had ever been, and it's a small place that I'm from, and you kind of knew everybody from your own age because you played football against them, or even though you were only 18, you'd seen them in the pub, or you all sort of, you know, it's from that kind of place. You do have a wide network. And because of that, no one had ever said, oh, well, you want to be this far away or that far away. You didn't know anything. So I came to an open day thinking, what's this about? And then the first day I came in, everybody just seemed to be really nice. And at the time I went to Leeds, to Sheffield, and I'm from in between Barnsley and Rotherham. And I probably didn't want to be as far away. And because people were nice and friendly, I thought, do you know what, let's give this a go. And even just coming back today, you probably see it different as an adult. And you see the other side, like Frankie said, you see how beautiful it is, you see the autumnal leaves, you see how good the buildings are, the facilities are, and having walked around it today, it's like a completely different uni to the one that we went to, and it's only, 15 years ago that we were here. But that friendship thing seems to be there straight away, and we've not seen that many people today, but everybody's smiling, everybody's chatting, and I think that's so invaluable that you've got here, and for me, I probably even get emotional as I say this, but the people that you meet when you come to Hull University, I think it's different to other places. I talked to my missus about it, and she only ever met the people that were in her flat at uni that first day. And I know the Lawns is not there now, and I'm sure the facilities have gone through the roof compared to what we had. But we sat in a room in the Lawns, and I remember the guy that was the warden at the time said to us, there's people in this room that'll be, like, you'll be friends with the rest of your life. There'll be people that get married, and you're thinking, you're looking around going, are you joking? Have you seen the state of the people in here? And then you look forward on, and you go into people's weddings. But it is like that, and the friendships that you make and the stuff I think from Hull is so different to my friends and colleagues and people now. And they talk about uni, they've got one or two mates. I've known Naps all that time. We probably don't speak that regularly, but you pick up the phone. If I'm in London, I'll meet you for a pint. And I think that's the thing for Hull, is it's not just the uni. And as I mentioned, I did something completely open in politics, philosophy, economics. And that was kind of because I didn't know what I was doing. But I would urge the people, even if you don't know what you're doing now, you might not, but don't worry about it. Just throw yourself into every opportunity that you get. Keep talking to people, keep making friends, keep making networks, because this place will set you ahead in years to come. I genuinely believe that. You can tell we're getting emotional then.
Sophie, obviously, you feel that this is the better university. I'm sure not that I want to lead you in any way, but having an undergraduate at a different university and then coming to work here, you've got the direct contrast, and I'm sure you'd advocate for the University of Hull.
Oh, absolutely.
Good,
absolutely. But no, I've had the pleasure of working at Hull since 2014. So I started off as a sport development officer, just on the back of my degree, and then I became a coordinator. And then in 2019, I had the pleasure and opportunity to be the sport development manager here. And my job is absolutely amazing. Working in sport, I think, is the best job, because you come out of bed and literally you're looking forward to work, and you're looking forward to obviously new opportunities. And I think the best thing about sport development for me is that every day is completely new, and you're working with amazing students like yourselves, you're working in the community, you're working with professional clubs, and you're working for, you're thinking of different projects to make a difference, to make a change. And since I've been working here, we've had insane opportunities, especially with the latest partnership with Team GB. And I can 100% say that my degree from sport development and coaching definitely equipped me to be the sport development manager here. But again, I think, like all of you have said on the panel, there is something special about Hull. Every year I've worked here, and everyone always says the friendships, the memories. And what I've noticed is that people come and study here and they never seem to leave, which is good, because I get to see amazing students that we work with. But there is definitely something about Hull, definitely something special about Hull, and I have the pleasure of doing the sports offer for you all.
I'm throwing you under the bus a little bit there, aren't I, James? Asking you to give your input as an outsider. But you work a lot in sport. You're just working on a sports podcast at the minute.
Yeah, we're about to. So my day-to-day role is BBC Radio Humberside is as predominantly a producer, but I can present and do. I'm just about to take on a role producing at the station's first ever football-related podcast, which more than ever has become incredibly important. I don't know if any of you are aware of some changes at BBC local level that have been well publicised in the last 4 weeks. I have to say, hand on heart, I don't necessarily agree with all of the changes, but they are at this stage proposals. But one of the things that is changing is a greater emphasis on digital, which is very important. I think for me, what they want to achieve and how they want to achieve it are two separate things. And certainly what they want to achieve is absolutely imperative to the future of the BBC. I don't necessarily think they need to reduce the amount of time of BBC local radio output to achieve that, but that's a separate issue. But yeah, so we're about to launch the first Hull City focused podcast the BBC will offer. So we're very much at the developmental stage at this stage of working out what it is we'd like to deliver in terms of the audience we want to talk to, in terms of do we make it a very, very specific kind of die-hard Hull City podcast, or do we try and bring in new audiences and people perhaps on the periphery? So we are definitely at the developmental stage. Just something I wanted to pick up on, being from Hull and being born in the city. I live in Beverley, but there is something about Hull when it gets inside of you, and it's a little bit like a virus. I think it goes in and then it starts attacking from within. But it's a good virus, and once it's got you, it's kept hold of you. And I think I'm incredibly proud as someone from Hull to see how many people, whether you move on and leave the city, or whether you stay here for a number of years beyond that time you're here for the degree, but how people, even those that are perhaps those that don't get Hull when they come here, how suddenly they do get Hull very quickly, and how they get its idiosyncrasies, its nuances, and love, immerse themselves in Hull as a city. And it makes me incredibly proud that the very few people come to the city and don't love it and don't take a piece of the city away with them or make their homes here and stay here long term, because we're ruddy good. We're a ruddy good city. For a city that doesn't necessarily sing and shout it necessarily, or perhaps doesn't necessarily fully deliver in City of Culture Year, it kind of does the city itself does its work for it. And that makes me incredibly proud of how many people leave here with a brilliant experience of the city, or indeed stay. And that long may that continue.
I agree, and that's actually something that that perception that we rely on as an institution. So those of you that are from Hull, those of you that have chosen to come and study here will be able to understand that and I guess even some of you will be able to relate to that we struggle a little bit from a recruitment perspective to get people to consider Hull in the first place. We're literally the end of the line. We're right on, we're a destination city. You don't accidentally pass through Hull. What we rely on is that conversion of perception, and that's why we promote our open days as much as we do, because when we get students on campus and they see the facilities that we've got, they feel that kind of collegiate friendly atmosphere, then our conversion rate is incredible, and that's testament to the city and to the university. But what we actually rely on is that kind of word of mouth, and everybody in this room, particularly our alumni that move away, to be ambassadors for the institution and to help us shout and sing about it, because we are a phenomenal institution. We've got world-leading research that happens here. We've got amazing teachers. We've got incredible graduates. So this is one of the reasons I'm so pleased that you've all joined us this evening to listen to more of your stories. Talking of which, I would like to hear from you in any particular order. I don't think we maybe need to stay so linear. I'll let you all fight over it. About the trickiest hurdle between graduating and where you are now. And just, you can probably tell that we haven't prepped any of the panellists. We wanted them on the hoof, so we are expecting great things. Liam?
Personally, it's probably not one tricky moment, but it's as you go through your career. Mm-hmm. And I think it's knowing when to move, when to make the change. And what I say with that is, I left uni and I had a job as a part-time sofa salesperson at SCS Sofas. And at the time, I thought the only thing I could do was go into selling sofas. And you came out of uni. It sounds really mad to see where you are now, but you're on decent money. You've been told, well, you can do this, you can do the other, and this is great. And then you're like, well, actually, I don't want to give up my weekends. Ironically, end up in football. But that was kind of, do I leave? But I'm on a good wicket. What should I do? And you sort of just dip your toe in the water, and before you know it, you made your first move to a blue chip company. I worked for PepsiCo for 7 years on a graduate scheme there, and similar thing again is you get to that point and you've been there in a big company. You can probably stay there for the next 20 years of your life and have a fantastic life, but then there's another thing. Do you go and move abroad? And it's making those, they're the tricky ones, and each time you need to have that support network there, because I would have probably just been myself and just stuck to what I knew. But by having the people behind you, I was fortunate, it's my parents, but people have got friends, trusted colleagues, trusted people that you just know. I would always ask them people when you come to a tricky point, because each time I've pretty much bottled it. Someone said, just do it, and if you don't like it, go back to what you were doing, and that next move is moving abroad. And then you have a great time, do you move back? And they're the trickiest points for me, is making the right decision at the right time. The kind of, I know it's called sliding doors moment, but you've sometimes got to take that opportunity, and that can feel really uncomfortable. But by doing that, I think that stands you in good stead in life, because you can always go back. And if you don't take your opportunities, you're always going to keep doing the same thing, and you'll be sat there at the end of your career, and you might have had a fantastic career, but you'll always have regrets. And I think the trickiest bits is making the right choices at the right times. But I would encourage you, if there's one bit of advice, is always ask questions, always seek advice of people you trust, because that'll put you in the right place, in my opinion. Yeah,
that's really interesting to hear you say that, Liam, because that's sort of like I can completely see why you would feel that, but it's strange for me because I'm almost the opposite, in the sense that I've never really moved. So I was kind of fortunate to sort of find myself in a role at Arsenal pretty quickly after I'd left the university. And so I've never gone through those sort of transitional periods. I've changed roles within the club, but I've worked at the club now since sort of 2009 or 10. So it's been a long time sort of within one company, working for one brand. I'd say for me, my biggest challenge was probably dealing with sort of a mild, well, maybe not so mild, but like an inferiority complex at the start, probably because that big opportunity seemed to come for me quite early on. You know, I was wrestling with that inferiority complex, I would say, sort of, you know, on a train down to London. You know, I was a kid who'd grown up in the Northwest, never really spent any time down south. All of a sudden, you're on a train down to go and meet with people from Arsenal, and I'm on the train thinking, Jesus, like, what am I going to do? I'm miles off it. I'm never going to be able to cope. Like, why are they interested in me? How am I going to survive? And I'd say that was my biggest challenge, really, sort of dealing with that initial sort of integration and almost feeling that I belonged and could offer something and add some value. So I'd say for me that would be sort of what stood out for me. And sort of, I guess, you know, coping mechanisms for me at the time would have been just making sure that like Dougie said, sorry, I call him Dougie. I've known him for years as Dougie, but it's surreal for me to call him Liam. But as Liam said, I guess having people around you that you can trust, that you can sort of, you know, almost bounce things off as a mentor or a confidant, whether that be a family member, a friend, or even it helps as well sometimes to have someone that's quite devoid from the situation, quite external, and they can really give you a sort of an objective perspective, which I found helped a lot. But yeah, that would sort of be my biggest challenge, and I guess a little insight into maybe how I try to approach it.
Yeah, I guess as a bit of a snappier answer for me would be, I think when you start a degree, you maybe have an idea of what you want to be at the end point. So maybe you start a sports science degree and you know you want to work in football and you want to be a sports scientist or a fitness coach or some discipline within a football club. So that's kind of your end point. And I think actually the middle bit from finishing your degree to getting to that place can be quite messy. And it can maybe be a bit longer and a bit more drawn out than what you think. So it's how you kind of navigate your way around opportunities to always work to the end point of what you wanted. And I think actually as an industry, certainly for sports science students wanting to get into football, I think we're in a far better place now than where we were certainly when we were graduating. You look at internships at the minute, and quite rightly so, there's a little bit of financial support there. I think, you know, roll back, I don't know how many years ago it was, 8, 9, 10 years ago, I went down to Southampton for a year, totally unpaid. And that was a bit of a gamble, but the fact that I'd come to Hull and I'd worked a little bit alongside my degree and I knew that I had the knowledge that I needed, I thought, right, well, I'm going down for a year, let's see what happens. And if nothing comes of it at the end, I've tried to use the degree and knowledge that I've got from the University of Hull to kind of get an applied practical role. So I think it's really nice to have an endpoint and to think, right, that's where I want to be and that's where I want my career to be, but how you get there can be quite scary and not linear, I guess.
I'd be quite interested, actually, Frankie and Sophie, that obviously there's been a real rise in equality within football due to the success of the Lionesses recently. And I wonder if either of you have felt that in the industry that you work in, and being women working in football, whether you've noticed any difference, whether you think it's harder and you're at a disadvantage because you're female working in football?
Yeah, I guess to answer that twofold, I think I can only talk from my experience, and I've never felt any sort of discrimination or any barriers at all at any club or in any role I've been in. And that's my honest answer. But I also appreciate that there's maybe females in similar positions to me that maybe have. I can only speak from my experience, and whether I've been lucky enough with the clubs that I've worked at or whether that's just how it is everywhere in the country, I'm not sure. But my experiences have been nothing but positive, working within a more male-dominated environment. Absolutely no barriers at all. And I think it's more been, if you can showcase yourself and you've got the ability almost, that kind of speaks for itself. But I've got to say that the success of the Lionesses has been incredible, absolutely incredible. And I think what's really nice for me, I'll be honest, I've never really followed women's football. I absolutely love it now. And what's quite nice is certainly, you know, I work at the first team at Middlesbrough, and a lot of the players speak about it now. They know the names, and that's so nice. You know, girls that play football now want to have Beth Mead or Stanway on the back of the shirts. So it's quite nice that now there is female role models. But I've never had any barriers with it. But certainly the Lionesses has been a real success.
Good.
Sorry, I know this wasn't directed at me, Crystal, but I would jump in on that, and from an off-the-field side as well, is that, again, I'm not a female, but within our senior management team within the club, there's 6 senior managers and 3 of them are female. And all of them had a different perspective. As I walked in the door, I probably did expect it to be a little bit kind of middle-class white people running it, suits running the game, and then as one person's kind of dropped off and the restructure we've kind of had, I wouldn't say we'd ever positively discriminate to get somebody in, but the right people have happened to be female, and now when we're in that room, it feels better. The whole, as a club, we're quite proud of that, and I think the decision-making process, and actually what we would have probably said is, yeah, let's do that, let's throw ourselves in, we'll put all our eggs in that basket. You kind of get a balanced perspective back. So I would say anybody who's not into looking at elite sport, playing in it, or being on the medical side of the game, off the field, there's definitely opportunities there. And I mean, we've just hired 2 new girls in our commercial team, and both of them have been away and got degrees. One of them's a master's in sports business, and they've come in, and from a commercial perspective, they're absolutely fine because they know football, but also they just offer a different thing to anybody they speak to. So I think off the field, it's definitely from my own perspective, it does seem to be quite an equal place to work.
Sophie, not just from your own perspective then, but have you noticed the clientele kind of levelling out at the sports centre? Do we have successful women's teams? Have we got that same representation?
Absolutely, and I think so. When I was a sport development officer, I used to focus on female participation at the University of Hull, and I think the one big change was the Sport England This Girl Can campaign. And This Girl Can was to get more and more women active in a range of different sport and fitness activities. And for me, I started this at the University of Hull, and we started a brand called Fabulous, which is aimed at women to take part in a sport session every single week, but they didn't find out until the evening. Fabulous is still here to this day and is ever so popular. And from the back of Fabulous, the outlet and signposting is that some of the girls have actually joined some of the sports clubs here, representing books, actually taking part in regional sport tournaments. And for me as an officer, to see girls that wasn't even active, wasn't even playing rugby, who are now representing the University of Hull on a Wednesday and are now still continuing to play rugby after they've graduated. For me, I've done my job, and I think for me, I've seen a massive growth in female participation, especially at Hull. So we have over 54 sports clubs, and I'd say since we've done the participation grant, I'd say half of that, like 80%, is actually females taking part. We've got International Women's Day coming up on the 8th of March as well, so I'm looking at doing quite a big This Girl Can takeover. But for me, I think the change was This Girl Can campaign through Sport England. What about yourself?
I mean, you will know from, I guess, if any of you have watched the World Cup coverage, you know, we've got a stage now where Alex Scott is obviously onto her 2nd World Cup, which is absolutely fantastic, and she's led the way on a national level of balancing out and a fairer looking panel of people in terms of BBC Sport. I think where perhaps the BBC locally needs to be better is a better balance of more women. We've got many women that work across, certainly in the time that I've worked in newsrooms, it certainly has got incredibly better and a lot fairer as well. I think in terms of sports coverage, I think local sports teams are getting there more, and I'm pleased to say I don't think that anybody's ever been marked down who's applied for a job because they're female, but I do think perhaps there has been in the past historically a lack of encouragement for women going into sports journalism and being encouraged to take up that as a career and, you know, sit at the back of a stand for Accrington and Grimsby and those kinds of games. And I think I'm seeing more women getting involved in our sports coverage increasingly, which is fantastic to see. And I think one trailblazer that we've got, and someone who's worked for the BBC locally actually longer than I have, is a lady at Radio York called Sharon Shortle, who has been the head of sport at Radio York for a long, long time. And this year she was part of the BBC's TV Rugby League coverage. And she was leading the commentary team for many of the games during the BBC's excellent Rugby League coverage. And certainly we're seeing a greater number of people, I think, apply for jobs within sports journalism, which is fantastic to see because, you know, I have to say, the teams I've worked with, whether that is in Leeds or Sheffield or Hull, have predominantly been male-dominated. And I don't think for any reason other than women didn't apply, and I don't know the reason why not. But certainly it's a lot more balanced now and fair. And I think as I touched on this whole sort of new world of digital and more work towards BBC Sounds and the input that will have growing. And I do genuinely hope that in the future that will, I think we are now a safe space for women to feel like they can be part of a team and be encouraged to try it as a career. And I think that is changing. It's changing in the most positive way as well. And what I see when I go in every single day is a very balanced newsroom of all genders, of all ideas, of all, and more importantly, I think not just gender, but also class backgrounds as well. It's so important that, you know, that I work in a workplace that has people who've got bringing in all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds, because that is really, really important that, you know, we have a mix of people who feel that they're not stigmatised by coming from a council estate or going to a comprehensive school or maybe not doing as well at school, but that they are given opportunities. So I think it goes beyond gender, and I think it goes to economic as well. And certainly in the last 5 or 10 years, I've seen great strides locally of newsrooms having a real balance of talents and genders as well.
Whilst we're talking about the connection between media and sport, I think what is quite interesting to maybe touch upon is how important that relationship building skill is when you work in sport. And obviously there was a time when there was no local commentary on BBC Radio Humberside. We're out of that era now and back into a much more fulfilled and mutually beneficial relationship. But you know how important, and we can start with you, James, but anybody jump into how important that relationship between media and the business is.
I don't know whether any of you do fancy a career within sports reporting and sports journalism, but building up a respect, building up a relationship, if you do go into covering, if you are interested in a media as a sport, building up that level of trust. I think the important thing is that with sports coverage, there will be difficult conversations to be had. The media has a right to hold to account, should hold to account. If Hull City Football Club go on a run when the season begins and the new manager, head coach, Liam Rossini, goes on a bad run, he should feel confident that we as an organisation challenge that bad run, ask why his team isn't performing, but that it shouldn't be done in a way where people fall out. There has to be a balance between us as an organisation being able to question sports organisations and them not to feel that they're being harmed in a sense, or taking their bat and ball home with them. Hull City has been a delicate situation, and I can list other clubs. Leeds United's been another example over the years where it's been a tricky situation between media and the team. But it is a very delicate balancing act. I don't know whether you at Arsenal, I'm sure your colleagues at Arsenal, there'll be those journalists who are on that sheet on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon in your case as well. And there'll be those where, you know, the media team go, oh, not them again. And there are those that will always divide opinion, but there has to be an ability as the media to be able to hold to account those in sports organisations. But it shouldn't be nasty, and it certainly shouldn't deteriorate a relationship. The hard questions should be asked in the same way we do with politicians. Mm.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think at Arsenal, our biggest challenge was actually with sort of a population of our own fans. With, you know, think about things like Arsenal Fan TV, which really grew in prominence and, was started to become quite divisive in terms of the relationship that I had with the club, and it was a really challenging situation because a lot of what they were doing was just trying to ask those difficult questions. Maybe there's an argument to be had about the way in which they went about that, but I think that I look at kind of where that relationship is now. It's completely different, and I think a lot of that is about the way in which organisations interact with their stakeholders. Obviously, one of the key stakeholders being the support base, the local community, the fans, and I think that's really important to sort of engage with them more, share more, open yourself up so that they can understand what we're trying to do, how we're trying to operate, and I think them having that context is really important. And I think a lot of the challenges and the frustrations often are born out of the fact that maybe those people or those groups of supporters just don't have that insight, and that's what creates the frustration, the anger, the not really understanding decisions that are being made, because there's just not that level of communication or engagement between them and the club, and I think that's really important, and we've certainly tried to do that a lot more in recent years. Even things like the All or Nothing documentary, I think, does a lot in terms of opening yourself up, allowing people to see what it's really like on the inside, and that just helps bridge that gap between the people that you're trying to reach and informing them more about who we are, what we're trying to do.
I'm sorry, I don't want to hog this, but actually, and I think you're right, and I think you point to Arsenal TV. I think the thing I've noticed working around the media of sport in certainly the last 10 years, is the dilution of it. We probably did to some extent have a certain level of monopoly as the BBC, because we are the BBC, but since then you've got so many organic ways that you can access your football club. I only have to go on Spotify now, and there's 2 or 3 different Hull City podcasts of varying degree of production quality. And the one thing that we're governed by is a whole set of rules around what we call producer guidelines, our own editorial balances and checks and balances, which I have to live and die by, and I'm sure you could probably throw lots of arguments, yes, but the BBC did this and that, but I still have a set of producer guidelines that are my Bible to some extent. So there is a line that I cannot cross. But nowadays, with all of these fan-based different forms of media, be it podcasts or YouTube channels, there is a definite blurring of that line now, and I think that's where we have to maintain that certain level of standard, that we are the BBC, we are governed by these rules, and we have to set that gold standard. And I think we have to remain true to that, because right now, with all of the other methods to find your favourite football club or rugby league club, the line is definitely blurred.
I think your relationship with the media will be slightly different, Ben, as well, because your role in particular, transfer window time, is fueled massively by media interest. How much of that plays in your favour?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely, I would say, a part of the game that's grown in terms of the interest, from a media perspective. You think about things like Deadline Day on Sky Sports News and the kind of the journey that went on, and I think there's just a greater deal of interest in terms of the player trading activities of clubs. So it's definitely something that I've seen rise. One of the things that we have to deal with is just the sheer amount of noise, to be honest, that's what it is most of the time, being linked with a whole host of players, or players of ours being linked with moves elsewhere, and sometimes that's that noise just creates distraction for people. So that's one thing that I think is a challenge. We do live in a world where fake news is, it's a bit of a Trumpian term, but it is real, and I think that definitely that can create some challenges. But yeah, from my perspective, it's really just that level of engagement that I've noticed from supporters and from media outlets alike, that there's just real now scrutiny, interest on exactly what moves the club is trying to make in the market. And I definitely think that that's a side of the game that, I think when I was growing up as a kid, we didn't really sort of have any interest or anything on that. It was more about what was happening on the pitch and more the tactical side, who's playing, who's not playing, why are they doing this. And I think now that whole sort of business of football, to coin obviously the title of tonight's event, is definitely grown a lot, and that's what I've noticed for sure.
I would just add, I think there's definitely that we're in that point now where the media's moved from the traditional media into the social media generation, and I think what we try and do as a club, and I think a lot of other clubs do, is we do have good relationships with the local radio, with traditional journalists, and it's kind of a lot easier to manage that and stay on top of it. So I regularly, if I'm at a match, I'll always make a point of going and seeing all our local journalists and having a nice relationship with them, and the chairman and the manager do the same thing. We go out for dinner with them, just so you've got that relationship, so that if something's not quite right, you can pick up the phone, or if a story comes out, you can say, hang on, that's a load of gobbledygook. You can kind of filter that, and that relationship is so important. And I mean, one of your former colleagues, Rob Staton's working for us tonight, an event we've got at the stadium, and I think that's the easier side of it, because you're dealing with people. The challenge I think we find as a club, I think every club finds it, is with social media. You can do everything you can right in the week, but if you don't get that result on a Saturday, all of a sudden everything's wrong. The club's rotten top to bottom, it's toxic, all of that, and your media team have got such an important job to do, and if people in the audience are looking to get into that, I'd urge them to follow as many clubs as you can and get it right, because I have an internal battle with my own media team, because I'd like them to be a little bit more risky and take that chance, because I think it helps grow your following, which then helps you grow your commercial deals. However, at the same time, they would argue back to me, and look at what happened with Nottingham Forest when they put a tweet out recently involving the two Wolves before they played Wolves. That overstepped the line. Before you know it, that's national news, and it's the media team getting ahead of the football team, and that should never be right either. So if that's something that people are looking to get into, I would say follow what you can, look at the good stuff, look at the bad stuff, and try and find your own line before you get into there, and it'll stand you in good stead when somebody, your CEO, your COO comes in and says, we should be doing this. You'll be able to play back to them live examples of, but what about this time and what about that? And if you've got that ethical, moral compass that you've seen, that should hopefully help you and your organisation when you get into it, because social media is a nightmare. As we'll all know from a football club, it couldn't be much worse.
Is yours following on about the media, because that might be best coming now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, following on from Liam, I think it's really important, and for me, it really goes to sort of the heart of the game, if we're speaking specifically about football, because my background was in kind of performance analysis, and I think one of the real challenges that football has versus a lot of other sports is basically it goes to the fundamental sort of rules and scoring system of the game, and ultimately, you know, goals are rare events in football, and what that does is mean that there's much more of an element of chance in the game than there is against other sports. So, for example, if two teams play basketball and Team A has 100 points and Team B has 60, you know, fundamentally, if you look at all the underlying performance data from that game, Team A would pretty much generally have outplayed Team B. Whereas in football, that's just not the case. Like, we know that sort of between 30 and 35% of the time that the score in a game of football is not reflective of the underlying performance. So, like Liam said, it's so evocative, it sort of evokes such an emotional reaction in people, and it's even worse because often it's misled. You know, your team can lose 1-0, and like Liam said, the club's a disgrace, it's lost its way, strategically they're miles off it, when actually, if you simulate and play that game 100 times, they might have, you know, literally they were just so unlucky, and you look at the underlying performance data, and actually the game probably 90 plus times would have gone the other way. And so that's where it can be really dangerous, because you get these really volatile swings in sort of temperature, you know, in respect of a club that are based on results that often, you know, the result is not representative of performance. So I think that's a real challenge in football that we have to deal with versus a lot of other sports. It's really important to look at things probably a bit more objectively over a you know, a longer period of time, to be able to draw conclusions that I think are a bit more meaningful than just looking at, you know, results. And it is a bit of a cliche, and everyone says, you know, it's a results business, and it is, but it's really important that if you're going to make decisions based upon results, you have to be confident that the result was telling you what you think it should be or what it is. And I think that's a big challenge that sort of leads on from what Liam was saying.
Yeah, I think off on a little bit of a tangent from this. My role has limited interaction with the media, to be honest. So in terms of adding to anything that you guys have said, I've not got a lot to add to that. But Crystal, you mentioned about building relationships, and I think it's important probably just to kind of stress how important that is. So when I think about my role as a fitness coach, you have to interact and build relationships with a whole host of people within the club. I look at my interactions over the past week. There's been academy players, so as young as under 9. There's been first team players, so international players, senior players, interactions with the manager, interactions with the CEO, interactions with parents. And how you interact and build relationships with all these key stakeholders really help you impart the knowledge that you've got. And without that, it's very difficult. So you could be the most knowledgeable person within that football club or within your degree or within your cohort currently on your course. But if you don't learn the real fine details about how you communicate with people and how you impart your knowledge, it's very difficult within the applied environment to kind of make a move, really. And I'm sure, you know, you guys on the panel as well might have bits to add to that, but I think you can't underestimate how important building relationships, whether that is with the media, whether that is with players, manager, how you change your communication and how you approach certain situations with different stakeholders within a club or within an organisation is massive, really, really important.
Thank you. I've just got 2 more questions and then we'll open it up to the floor. One for all of you and one just for you, Sophie. And we'll start with that one. So we've talked a lot about football and working in the industry from a commercial perspective and from quite a high profile perspective with obviously Premier League teams. There's another side to football, isn't there? There's the benefit, there's the societal benefit, there's the cultural benefit, there's the relationship, the community building benefit. And one of the programmes that we run here at the University of Hull is Football Unites, that you could probably talk a little bit about.
Yeah, absolutely. So Football Unites started last July off a successful funding bid with the Bucks and the FA. And the main purpose of Football Unites was to minimise the participation gap of participants who were 16 and above and who are specifically BAME. Here is our pull-up banner, just to the right-hand side. And basically, we started the programme. We started promoting it in the community. We was doing it on social media. We was doing it in local Facebook pages. And for the first 2 weeks, we only had 2 participants that turned up, and we was thinking, what's going on? However, as Frankie was saying, partnership work is absolutely key. So we started to work with Hull City Council, East Riding FA, Open Doors, the Jobs Centre, Tigers Trust. And when we started to work with all these different partners, hundreds of people started to come into the University of Hull to start playing football on a weekly basis. And our target to the FA and Bucks was 150, and to date we have engaged over 350 participants. On a weekly basis, we engage 80 to 100, and that's through their love and passion for football. The one special thing about Football Unites is it's a mixture of student, staff and community, but a high percentage of our participants are those who are seeking asylum. And I'd say Football Unites is a safe space for them. It's a space that they can meet new friends. What we've found is that quite a lot of our participants get relocated to Hull, and Football Unites is sometimes their only way of actually communicating with other people around the city. And on the back of Football Unites, it's formed friendships. It's allowed them to use some of our facilities, such as strength and conditioning. We've done some university open days with them to actually raise awareness of different options available here on campus. We've done Pacific sports coaching. We're actually putting some of our players through their refereeing coaching qualifications. And on the back of one of the consultations that we did, it was quite a high percentage that participants really wanted to go into the English football system. So what we've done is we've created Football Unites football teams who are now playing into the Hull Sport Intramural League on campus. and they're top of the league at the moment, which is amazing. We have funded kit, but what we see is every single week we have new participants join us on a Monday night, 8:30 till 10. And what we'd just like to raise awareness of is some of our participants unfortunately don't have the right equipment, such as the right footwear, clothing. Some actually turn up in trousers, light suit, shoes, and we basically openly promote any football boots, any kit, please donate it to the Alumni Sports Centre, because again, we want to ensure that Football Unites is for anyone, from any culture, any person, that they can come to the University of Hull, feel safe, and most of all, enjoy what they love, which is football. And on the back of that, what my team are doing is that we're creating and developing those participants to become leaders, to coach within the project. And yeah, for us at the University of Hull, it's a project that we're absolutely proud of, and we're actually serving the community. So yeah, that is more about Football Unites.
Thank you. Football Unites is about football that does good as well, isn't it? It's about coming together through the sport, bringing people together and having a real direct positive impact on the local community. There is a QR code on the flyers that are on everybody's table, and we would ask you to consider if at some point during the course of this event you'd like to support Sophie's programme and help Sophie's team be able to reach more people and give them those same opportunities, then we'd really encourage you to consider making a donation to the programme via the QR code, or there will be buckets on the way out if anybody would like to do it in the old-fashioned way, if anybody still carries cash these days. So, like I said, I have one last question, then I'll hand it over to the floor. And I don't want to keep talking. I would like to encourage you to give nice and concise answers to this one. What I want is the most surprising thing you've learnt since moving into working in football. Ideally comical. I'm looking for some laughter. Sorry. Oh, okay, we can go back to surprising.
Mine's quite harsh on my own industry, but is how backward it all is. In terms of when you walk in, you've worked in big businesses around the world and blue chip organisations, and you walk in and it's like, wow, this is what goes off. Conscious this is getting streamed other places, but it is hard because these people have been in the jobs that on, they're absolutely brilliant at what they do. But it's the process side that I think is, unfortunately, not comical and it's not a short answer either, but that's the thing that's most shocked me is you'll turn up somewhere, and I'll not mention any names of clubs, but you'll get there and their facilities or what they're doing, you're like, wow, we're in the same league. It probably shows where we are as a club. We're not in the potential league we'd like to be in, but it is so different to what you'd expect. And again, not a comic answer, I apologise, but it's just be open to whatever you walk into and then making it as best you can would be my answer on that. Hopefully someone's a bit more comical than me. I've just stunk the place out with that one.
I think for me, I am still ultimately a football fan, and I've been a passionate football fan since I was about 10 or 11, really. So it's not really a surprise. Well, it is a surprise. Is doing those things that those money can't buy experiences. I think that I've had where you kind of pinch me moments, and I have to remember that I am a BBC journalist, so there is that professional aspect to me, and that I'm there to work and there for a reason. But then you stood on the turf. I mean, I've never been that sort of person that's wanted. I can think of some, I think, within the industry, I suspect, who wanted to be pro footballers and never made it. So the next best thing is to work in the sport from a different angle. I was always rubbish at football. I was never going to be a footballer, never aspired to be a footballer. But there's something quite weird when you're standing on the pitch at Wembley and you're in the goal mouth that Hull City have just put 4 or 5 past, was it Sheffield United, I think? Sheffield United or Sunderland or Sheffield United, and you're standing there thinking, I'll never replicate this experience. I think the birth of my child or, that getting married will be will be up there with my better things, but then there'll be the standing in the goal mouth at Wembley when Hull City have just got to the FA Cup final, which I never thought in my lifetime that I would ever see. So I think the surprise is the pinch me aspect, I think. And also how tall footballers are. Tom Huddleston's massive.
It's hair. Well,
It's
not
not just his
anymore, is
hair,
it?
he's just
Not anymore.
huge. And that's what I can never get over, is the sheer size of a footballer.
As somebody who has given birth and has had children and also been to Wembley, I can tell you the Wembley experience was much less painful.
Yeah, maybe not the FA Cup final, maybe, but certainly the semi. But yeah, it's those pinch me moments for me when you're walking past Arsene Wenger at Arsenal, and you go, "That's him off the telly." You think this is weird. You know, on one hand you want to get a selfie, but then you go, "Nope, I'm here for a professional reason." So it is. It's just, and I'll never be more grateful than the fact that my job has presented me with those opportunities to do these things.
Thank you.
I think when you said most surprising, we're probably all sat here thinking, can't say that one. Probably can't say that one either. But, yeah, you said it, but I probably can't say that one. But yeah, probably one of the most surprising things for me was when I found out that the manager that I guess I was working for at the time got sacked by seeing the yellow banner on Sky Sports in the canteen. It's the first that we knew. Quite surprising, yeah.
So that happens.
That's a true story, yeah.
Wow, okay.
I guess for me, one of the most surprising, again, that I can share would be that often the manager of the month pictures that you see, they're wearing a pair of shorts on the bottom half. I'd say that's quite surprising. I always thought they were like looking sharp in a full suit, posing with the manager of the month, and actually the bottom half is a pair of training shorts, socks and trainers, and they've just got a mock shirt and jacket on. That might be up there.
I'll go a little bit more light-hearted this time, because I realised from last time, but one of the strangest moments for me was being a Sheffield Wednesday fan growing up, and we've got two owls, Aussie Owl and Barney Owl, and we're very fortunate to meet a lot of famous people in the job that we do, and you're right, you don't appreciate it, but the one time you definitely don't take selfies and things, because even though you want to, it's just not professional. But the one time I did find myself taking a selfie was I went into the lift on the second floor, and I was just in there with Barney Owl and Aussie Owl, and I thought, this is too good to be true. So I have got one selfie in football, and it's me in between two owls. But yeah.
Probably a more serious one though, that I'd say is surprising sometimes, is some of the people that you'll come across in football. I'd say is you know, where all my experience has been. I would say that what surprised me in some cases is that whilst you meet some incredible people that are, you know, super bright, talented and amazing, there are some people that you'll meet that are in incredible positions that when you sort of manage to scratch beneath the surface, they're maybe not what you would think they would be from an external position. So I think that that's something that has surprised me a few times in my career. I've come across some people like that. And so I'd say that my reflection on that is that, you know, you also have to sort of back yourself as well sometimes, and understand that, you know, it goes back to that inferiority complex I mentioned at the start. Just have the confidence that, do you know what, you can add real value there. And although someone's CV might have some of these unbelievable clubs from all over, you know, the top table of European football, often they're not all they're cracked up to be. And you know, someone that's maybe come from a much more modest background with Scunthorpe United on the CV, and like in my case, you know, you might be able to do not a bad job themselves as well. So that would be probably something that surprised me a few times in my career.
Lovely. And my personal highlight was when I was at uni, my second year, I got to go to South Africa for 3 months, all expenses paid for, and that was through the Football Foundation. And I can remember one of the days my manager said, right, you need to be leading on this media event. So these are the upcoming Premier League players, and you need to be promoting what we do here and basically support each of the football players. So I think I was in my second year of the placement, and I was thinking, oh, brilliant, brilliant. I've got some like English lads coming over, like I'm really looking forward to it. And when they all arrived, yeah, it was just wasn't a lifetime opportunity. So there was the likes of Nathan Ackey, there was Jordan Pickford, but at that moment in time, I didn't know any of them. So I was just speaking to him like a normal person, and all of them were absolutely fantastic. There was actually out in South Africa for some media press training. So there was travelling around all these different townships, interacting with different organisations, but there was actually on training on how to answer certain like questions correctly. And from a girl from Grimsby, mixing with all these different Premier League players, I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I was making sure I took lots and lots of selfies. And I was like thinking when I got home, right, who are these all going to be playing for? And then I can remember seeing Jordan Pickford on the telly. And I said to my partner, I've met him. And he went, no, you haven't. And then the next thing, I was aggressively scrolling through my Facebook albums. I said, I have. And then the next thing, here's a picture of me and Jordan. And then again, I saw Nathan Aki. I was like, I've met him as well. And then again, I think these are just personal highlights. And when I was actually at a football conference with Hull Sport, we got to go to St George's Park, and then we saw the Chelsea team, and Nathan Aki was there. So I ran up to him, I said, oh, can you remember me? And he said, no, I can't. I said, oh. I said, let's have a selfie for old time's sake. But yeah, that's just a personal highlight for me.
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, so we're gonna open up to the floor. Hopefully that's given you lots of things to think about. So just while you're composing yourself, thinking of questions, I've got a couple of colleagues that have got microphones that are going to wander around. So if you want to wave your hands if you've got a question, but just before all of your hands go up, if we could just start with a round of applause for our panel so far. Thank you. Okay, so we can't really see anything, just so you know, from up here, so I'm going to rely on you guys to just take the mics.
You hear me? Yep, it's working.
Thanks.
One for Ben. You mentioned you used to work in performance analysis. Yeah, just want to know just how much the gathering and analysis of data has changed over time in your experience.
Just check I heard that. So how sort of the function of performance analysis has changed over the years?
Yes, and data generally.
Yeah. Massively, I would say. So yeah, it was something that kind of when I entered into the industry, it was a lot more video analysis based, and that was kind of the skill set of most analysts, myself included. You know, it was all about trying to use video to help sort of understand the game on a deeper level. And then, yeah, my next job after kind of working for Scunthorpe United was at a company called Prozone Sports that at the time were sort of the biggest, I'd say, market leader in providing data in the football industry. And that was kind of really when it was starting to gather pace. And sort of fast forward 12 or 13 years from them, and it's incredible now the level of kind of objective understanding that's done, and modeling and advanced analytics and data science. These are all functions now that are just commonplace in football. You know, we've got a huge internal infrastructure of developers, of data scientists, of programmers. You know, literally they're so vital now in the modern game because there's so much data available, and it's about trying to use that in a smart way. I think we're fortunate because a lot of the challenges that clubs have is that there's almost too much data, and they don't have enough resource in the clubs to sort of leverage it in a smart way. And thankfully, you know, we're sort of very well resourced in that area. We've got, you know, we literally have a data processing center out in Laos, Southeast Asia, where we codify lots of games from all over the world that generates data for us that we use then to sort of drive all of our player recruitment processes, all of our opposition analysis, all of the work I do in sort of loans and player trading and all of that stuff is all now really underpinned by advanced analytics basically. So it's huge now, and like I said, it goes back to the rules of the game and the scoring system, and it's so important that you understand the game on a deeper level, because that surface level information that people see, you know, goals and assists and those kinds of things just really don't tell the story. So I think that the evolution of what we've seen in football, to be honest, is indicative of every industry. You know, you think of all industries now, the way that they've evolved from you know, the use of data, I think is something that you've seen everywhere, but certainly in football it's it's really gone into overdrive, I'd say, in the last decade. And you know, I've been fortunate to sort of go on that journey at a club like Arsenal that I guess have been quite close, I'd say, to the forefront of that within football. There's certainly other clubs in this country. You know, Liverpool are well regarded in terms of their approach to sort of leveraging advanced analytics and how they can utilize that to help drive a more effective, you know, football operation. And you know, we would sort of like to think that we've done some good stuff in that space as well. So in answer to your question, it's changed a lot for the better, I would say. And now it's literally a part of every single aspect of our football operation. You know, is fueled by advanced analytics and data. Yeah.
I'll just jump on that as well, in that Ben's one of the experts in the entire industry on it, but we were due to change one of our cameras to move to another company just after COVID. I remember ringing Naps up and saying, look, what do you think of this one versus that one? And the conversation was, whatever you buy now will be outdated in 6 months, because it's moving that fast. We did make the plunge, we did make a big investment into it, but even the clubs we're all kind of following the Premier League example and trying to get as on board as we can within the budgets that we've got. So we're a club, as you mentioned, we do have the technology, but we try and analyse as much as we can, but we actually look, and to try and bring it back to a university level, we have analysts that come to us as part of there. We use Sheffield because we're based in Sheffield. We give some of their master students projects to work on for us, just to say, look, on a voluntary basis, we can give you experience if we can use your expertise to help analyse some of our data. And I would imagine, I don't know, I don't want to speak on Hull's behalf, but I would imagine Hull would have the same thing. So if you've got a link up there, is write to these people, because the chances are they'll want support, and they might just give you one project on look at corners data, or look at this. Naps will tell you a lot more now on that perspective, but we do reach out to the unis and vice versa to help us, because we've got the data, we just necessarily don't know how to analyse it. So
one of the things I would say that's changed a bit as well is, when I think back to working for a data provider that operated in football, they sort of monopolised the market and worked with all the clubs, and they would provide data and sell it to all the clubs. And then, of course, the clubs would sort of try to manipulate that data and leverage it in their own way. But fundamentally, they were all working with the same raw material, and that was quite limiting in terms of how much value you could glean from that versus your competition. And I think that where it's probably changed a bit now is clubs are starting to collect a lot more of their own data. Like I said, we collect our own data. It's a huge operation, but it means that it's proprietary. It means that Man City, Chelsea, you know, Tottenham, they're not looking at the same stuff that we are, because it's our own, it's proprietary, and that helps us try and leverage some competitive advantage. And I think we've seen that more and more in football now. Clubs are building their own bits of software, they're building their own databases to house all of their scouting information or whatever it may be, and they're all sort of, I guess, examples of clubs trying to just sort of find their own proprietary way of doing things, and not buying sort of off-the-shelf products that ultimately everyone's got, and then, you know, it's quite difficult to, I guess, differentiate yourself.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm interested in how you yourselves would describe what it is about football as a sport that sets it apart from other sports and has made it become what it is today, and has been in history, and I'm sure it will be in the future. So what is it that makes football special? For me, it's, again, I feel like a bit of a broken record, but it's that the nature of the game and the scoring system means that because there's so much luck, that's what creates that emotional response in us all, and that's what can drive you crazy with frustration and anger that you've lost the game that you should have won because you were the better team. And it's also the game that can make you walk away thinking we've absolutely stolen a victory there. And I think that's what I think makes the game so addictive almost. So for me, it would certainly go to the sort of fundamentals of the rules of the scoring system, and yeah, I think that's why it's a game that can literally drive you crazy in both a good and a bad way.
I think I look at it from a more almost a kind of a tribal perspective of, but also how it really can raise moods as a community or reduce moods as a community. And I think, I mean, actually, somebody sitting here, Julian, who knows me very well, we shared many a memory at the MKM Stadium, KCOM Stadium, and I think, because I work in the kind of the news perspective of sport, I don't have the the kind of the sort of the deep connection that you've got from the sports science perspective, but I've seen what football can do in terms of the sorts of things that even you get a big employer come to a city, and yeah, clearly a big employer brings with it jobs, prosperity, a boost to the economy. But I've equally seen what a period of success can do, not just in Hull, but I've seen it in Grimsby and Scunthorpe as well, and how a football club can knit a community together. You have generations of supporters that go from the granddad to the grandma to their generation, to the generation below them, and it brings people together, and the same with rugby league in the city, but it brings people together in a real sense of local passion and pride, and that can then have huge benefits to a community from an economic perspective. And you know, how many people on a Saturday or a weekend's moods are governed by the success and failure of their teams? I find that incredible, and it brings families, it brings people together. It helps to create friendship bonds.
I think I'll just add a little thing onto that is, I think there's very few sports at the elite level or at the top level where, like Ben says, it can be so unpredictable. So you only have to look at the FA Cup. I'm speaking from experience last year with Middlesbrough. We went on an unbelievable FA Cup run, and it happens all the time. Every year there's an FA Cup upset. You look at the World Cup, there's been upsets already there. So I think at the top level, I don't think there's a lot of sports around the world where at the elite level it's still unpredictable, and I think that's probably what we all love about the game. And
I'll go completely, not opposite it, but another reason for that, I think, is the barriers to entry, in that anybody can literally, if you stood outside here and you'll see something shaped like a ball, and you can kick it to your mate and pass it back, and we've all probably played on the streets, played on the jumpers for goalposts, that kind of thing. Is you can kick a ball, you can emulate that elite level that Frankie talks about, just in your local park, in your back garden. And I think that's going back to your points earlier on regarding Football Unites. I think I got the wrong name then, but with Football Unites, is those people arrive in the country, have got nothing, but they can turn up. Someone give them a pair of boots. Don't even need boots. They're plain trousers, as you mentioned, but you can make friends. And I'll back, and it sounds like you talk about yourself, but I've moved to different countries in the world and turned up, definitely not like the situation these guys are in, but you've got no mates, you don't know a single person, but you know how to kick a ball about, not very well, as Ben will tell you, but you can turn up and you can have a kick about, you can get new friends. And I think that's what sets football about, is you can do it at any level. Even walking football now, it's a way of, you can just turn up somewhere with your trainers, with something else, and just play football. That's what sets it apart for me.
Thank you, guys. Have we got more questions? Yes, thank you.
Hi, I play football. We spend on a cold pitch on Sunday morning watching my kids play. And training with kids also. From your expert knowledge, what advice would you give to the young man?
That's a great question.
From a playing perspective.
You're a lot better than me, Ben, so
you
can go on.
I would just say, depending on your age and the stage of sort of your life, you've got to enjoy it, you know, first and foremost. Like, I think that's kind of a prerequisite for anything that you do in your life. You know, you've got to have sort of a passion for it, and you've got to enjoy it. You've got to want to go there, and I think that has to stay at the absolute heart of it. And even at the absolute top level, I think of some of the guys at work, you know, that's one of the things that they do, you know, the best players, the ones that I think we all enjoy watching as well, like they really enjoy it. They play with a smile on their face. They play with sort of a curiosity. They always want to sort of, they almost look like they're playing with their friends on the street, but they're actually playing on the biggest stage in some of the biggest competitions. So I think that enjoyment, that passion for it is so key. And then, yeah, just keep going. You know, there's one of the things I do is work a lot with players on what we call pathway management, and my job is to try and help find a path for them that hopefully takes them into the first team at Arsenal, but if not that, then, you know, a great career, either at another club in another league, or even sometimes a great career outside of football. It still happens for some players that we have in our system, you know, is a really proud academy at the highest level, but we'll still have players that get to 17, 18, and then in a couple of years' time they're no longer playing. So I would say just if you enjoy it, keep going, because everyone's path can be different, and no journey really is the same. So we've got players that have come to the game late from grassroots that have then ended up reaching the highest level, and conversely we've had players that have been the talked about sort of star child, with signing huge boot deals with massive kit manufacturers since the age of 10 or 11, and by 17 or 18 they're out of the game. So everyone's journey can be different. So I would just say, if you enjoy it, you're passionate about it, just keep doing that, and hopefully that will fuel you and take you somewhere good, whether it be playing in the Premier League or having a job outside, but still having a real passion for the game. So that would be sort of my advice.
I would echo that, especially the part that you say about playing with a smile on your face, because and to go with that, make sure you're playing, because as I mentioned, I remember being in the under-9s team and I couldn't get a game, and my dad was coming to watch me playing, and he made me go and play for the under-8s, and I remember it's probably mentally scarred me to the point I'm talking about it now, but I felt like an imposter. Why am I in the year below? I shouldn't be. I'm cheating, all that kind of thing. But looking back, it was because he just wanted me to play football. And by doing that, yes, it probably was against the rules at the time, but you started playing, because you weren't good enough to play with your own age group. You then go through, and at different points in your life, you then realise, well, actually, am I playing this week? I'm actually enjoying it. No, well, I'll go and play someone else where I can play, because football is not about necessarily what happens and everybody that makes it. It's about the skills it gives you to make mates, to talk about people, the teamwork. And it's funny, I was on a course this week, and what they talk about is not even people that have played at the highest level. When they go for job interviews, what do people say? And they'll say, oh, I'm an ex-footballer. And the guy that was teaching us on the course was like, and what comes with that? Is like nothing. What you should be saying is, what I've learned is how to meet deadlines by being on time for training every day, how to work as a team, how to deliver results, how to go above and beyond, how to literally cover for my mates, how to function in life. I think football teaches you that. So as long as you're playing, as long as you've got a smile on your face, I think it's what it gives you. Yes, you want to be at the top level, but if you don't, it gives you so much more in life, and I think that's it. Have a smile on your face and make sure you're playing.
So I've just got one thing to add. So this might be a little bit specific, but based on my experience and my role, I would say try and enjoy other sports as well, would be my bit of advice. So we see in the academy system that because I guess the rules that we're governed by, there's a set amount of hours that the players have to train. And what's happening now in academies is actually a lot of those hours are I say a lot, that's not true. Some of those hours are being taken up by a multi-sports programme, because they feel that actually children that play different sports, when they get older and they get 15, 16, 17, are actually much better athletes and the better movers. So I think if you enjoy other sports, my bit of advice would be to continue with other sports as well, but still have your passion for football if that's what you love. Because I think the skills that you can get from playing different sports are really important.
Hi, good evening. So I'm really curious about the actual business of football, the ins and the outs, especially with players. You work with the loan system. You also work with the operations. So I'm thinking there's so many things that go into deciding players to loan out, maybe game time. How does the club make money? Sometimes I'm guessing, for big wage players, using players like maybe Lukaku, the club that owns the player would want to pay part of the wages because the wages are too much. How do you decide things like that? What are the metrics involved? Moving away from that, operations in general of the entire football club, paying for things like water, how does all that run? How do you manage that? How do you deal with your profit and loss at the end of a year, calendar year? I know there's amortization, which, it's more of manipulation by accountants, but what is the actual business of football?
So I reckon me and you will split that one, Liam, yeah? So for the first part of your question, that's literally kind of, I guess, my role now. So the first thing I would say is that it goes fundamentally to the purpose that you're why are you trying to use the loan system? So, we use it for two real purposes. So the first purpose is for player development. So we want to try and use it as a vehicle that can help us improve our players by giving them different challenges that can help them make the transition from being an under-21 player to a first-team player, hopefully, because obviously that gap between those two teams is huge. And some players can make the step all in one, like Bakayo. Other players, they can't, or maybe there's not a space in the first team for them. So we have to then explore other ways of giving them different challenges that can help stimulate them to continue to develop. Because if they just stayed in the 21s, where they're maybe a really strong player and it's quite easy for them, it's not going to be conducive to helping them develop and achieve their potential. So that's the first way we use it, is for player development. The second way is from more of an asset management sort of perspective. So we'll use it to try and drive value in our players. Referring to them as assets, it sounds a little bit crude, and I guess it is, but that's the reality as well. We've done that in some cases where maybe we've taken a player that isn't playing so much with us. We can loan them to another club. The decision around that's quite nuanced. We look at lots of things, whether it's playing style or the head coach profile, or all sorts of different things. Hopefully it goes well. We can increase their market value and sell them for a huge profit. And so that's the other lens. So you've got player development, you've got asset management, and that's the kind of two ways that we approach it. In terms of how we would structure deals, again, it's all up for negotiation. Ultimately, if we're talking about loans, then typically, if it's a young player, ultimately it's more going to be about development, and the football project is going to lead the decision. We're not a club that will go into the market looking to loan a young player and kind of be ruled by binary numbers that say if you don't pay X, you're not going to get this player on loan, because that would be us prioritizing the sort of financial side of things over potentially their development. So we'll go into the market and look for, okay, what's the best football proposition for the player? What's going to help them develop most as a human, as a football player? And then, of course, we have to try and make the other side of it fit, but it will work that way around rather than the other way. Of course, when you kind of move up the chain and you're dealing with bigger players, with first-team players, where the market for those players is much bigger, then the financial side becomes a bit more important, because the numbers are bigger. They can have a big impact on your club's P&L in terms of, from player trading's a huge sort of swing factor in that. So that's looks a little bit different at that level. But it's really interesting, because you can leverage that sort of loan system, that market well for both of those reasons, and it's something that we're trying to do smarter work in all the time. I think we've managed to do better in that respect. In terms of, sometimes we'll use it for player development. We've got it with, for example, Emile Smith-Rowe was someone that we loaned to then reintegrate into the team. We've done it with William Saliba recently. And then there's other players where it's more using the loan system to drive value and sell. Somebody like Joe Willock would come to mind with an example like that. And then for others, it's young players that we try and give challenges to that can help improve them. And maybe their journey's not going to end at Arsenal, but what we've done is give them a platform to help create a market for them to kickstart their career outside of Arsenal. And from that respect, there's a real big sort of strong moral component as well. We want to try and help our players have a springboard into the industry, and if that's not going to be at Arsenal, then we want it to be at the best, highest level that we can get them, if that's what they wish to do. So that's kind of, I guess, a little bit around the first part of the question. I'm going to definitely leave the operational stuff to Dougie. That's certainly, well, to Liam, sorry, that's certainly more his field than mine.
Yeah, it's probably interesting that we're answering it in two parts, because for a lot of clubs, us included, us kind of operate that way, in that my kind of role as COO is looking after everything that is not football. So my job is to make as much money as we can in order to fund Ben's part of the operation, which is ultimately what we're all here for. It frustrates me sometimes, because I will pay a footballer X amount of pounds per £1,000 per week, but then we're having a literal discussion in the office about what price we're paying for toilet roll. They're the kind of real life conversations that go on, so that you can squeeze every last penny of your margin, so that you can put potentially a better player on the pitch. We're quite fortunate at the club that I work for, and we've got a chairman that has put money in there. They're paying for new iPhone, we're buying more toilet roll to cover that one.
You need some new AirPods as well.
but that's where we look at. So you start at the top level and you look at your biggest assets that you've got, and that'll be your front of shirt sponsorship, your kit manufacturer deals. That's where probably your biggest money is. Stadium sponsorship. Hull City have got a good example of that with the recent deal with MKM. You then look, oh, if we can't get the top sponsor, where do we sweat every single penny out of this? Is that hospitality boxer? So you've got a commercial team that are out selling, but where we seem to have quite a lot of success is in the upside. Is really for every pound we can save on the bottom line, sorry, that is worth £10 on the top line. So a lot of it is cost cutting while you're trying to put money at the top. And realistically, do I get frustrated when we're playing away at Lincoln and we're having an overnight stay? I'm thinking, well, it's an hour and 20 minutes in a car. Of course I do, because that money that we're spending on those players, that'll take me 4 or 5 Halloween events to try and generate that money back. But that's kind of what it is. But when we get 3 points at Lincoln, everybody's happy, and that's kind of the tough part of it. So I know Ben's smiling, I'm sweating thinking about tomorrow's budget meeting, but it's everything in terms of the operation side, and that's the bit that shocked me the most. When I mentioned earlier on around being backward, it's probably because it's that many players to spin. At every moment in time, we found out today while I'm here, one of my lifts has broken in the stadium. We've only got 2 lifts and we've got 450 corporate people here on Saturday. Trying to get a lift engineer out is not cheap. That money's spent, and that becomes your number 1 focus for the day. So the operation side is always challenging, but the more good people that you surround yourself with, hopefully they're making the right decisions when you're not there. And even when you do that, the money that you save, you never get back anyway because it goes to the football side. But ultimately, we want to win. That's why you're in sport. You're there for match day, and when the goal goes in, it's not just the first team that's celebrating, it's not just the fans that's celebrating. It's a lady on the front desk who's been there 58 years, and she's celebrating the same as everybody else. And I think that's when it becomes, you realise why you do it, and the operations work that you put in, it's all genuinely about the success that goes on the pitch.
One thing I would say as well, which I guess really emphasises how important it is for clubs to do smart work on the sort of football operations side, is just how much of a club's revenue that will kind of take up. So if you take a club's revenue, by the time you pay player salaries and you've spent money on transfer fees, that's probably going to be north of 80% of the club's revenue. So it just means that it's so important that, like Dougie said, Liam, sorry, to keep doing that, Liam could do amazing work on the operational side for a year, and that can all be just completely blown by making a poor decision on the football operations side, by awarding a player a silly contract, or paying over the odds for a player on a transfer, and it just doesn't work. And that's where I think the industry has really started to move forward. It doesn't mean that we get them right all the time, of course, but it's a lot about risk minimization, basically, and how can you do as good a work as possible to add rigor to the process to make sure that you don't make those mistakes very often or at all. Because if you're a club that can not really make mistakes in the transfer market and with your player trading activities, then you're going to give yourself a chance to be a pretty successful team on the pitch, but also organisation more broadly. So yeah.
Just one thing I would add, obviously, as you know, I'm not on the football business side of things, but actually earlier this year I hosted an event at the Middleton Hall where we had members of Hull City, the manager, the then manager, Shota Olarte, the vice chairman who works on behalf of the owner, who is Turkish-based predominantly, and the then CEO, who's now left actually, a man called Jim Rodwell. And I think the biggest shock we got that night, bearing in mind is you've got a room full of die-hard Hull City fans who all want a new number 9, who all want that creative midfielder. Actually, there's one all over from Arsenal, isn't there, at the moment? Let's ask you about it. But the biggest shock of the night was when Jim Rodwell revealed the heating bill, the energy bill has gone up. And I think one thing this man, I'm sure, will be battling with, as we all are, is that cost of living crisis. Because yes, we know our energy bills have gone up, but stadiums, I'm guessing, are quite massive things. And in Hull City's case, the electric and gas went up £1 million.
Well, it's another conversation I've had on the way here is our electricity bill is £1.7 million per year, and it's gone up 140% now. Not boring with too many numbers, but what that means is that is a massive increase that we have to swallow. So what it does do is, fortunately for me, is the decisions that sometimes it's, do we sign Malik Williams from Hull, to use a live example, or do we have solar panels? And it's a conversation I had with the chairman in the summer, and I was really pushing to get solar panels on the roof of the stadium, because to me that's an investment that can pay back every single year. But to Ben's point earlier on, if you sign a player and he goes on and scores 20, 30 goals, the money that we pay is worth 4 times that, and all of a sudden, that's the thing with football, is your money does come from, it's spent on the pitch, but also can be generated from on the pitch as well. The only difference being now is because of the hike in energy prices, we've now really expedited that decision to put solar panels on. It's a case of how quickly can we get it done, and all of a sudden it's gone from being, and this is that movable piece that we talked about before, is that was probably number 2, 3 on our agenda, and probably because of the size of the investment, we weren't looking to do it quickly. All of a sudden something comes like that and you've just got to move, and we're looking at 300 to 600 grand worth of investment overnight to try and get that energy bill down. And the fortunate thing is it pays for itself overnight, but it is a real life challenge that we face. But to kind of spin it in a more positive way, one of the things that I know a lot of clubs are doing and we're doing at the moment is because of the cost of living crisis, every football club has a community trust alongside it, and we're doing things now, along with many clubs, of inviting people in for a warm space, or we're setting that up now so that we can invite people in and they just come in for tea, coffee, biscuits, so they're not using their own energy, so they're using ours. And that's the other side of football that we do get involved with, and the community do a fantastic job of doing that, the community programme. That's the other bit of football, and one of our mantras is trying to be a club for more than just the 90 minutes, which goes against a lot of what I've just said, but it is that. The clubs have been there 150 years in our case, we're nearly 160 now, and the community is so important. In this time is when people should pull together and try and give more tickets out. Our sponsors are doing that at the moment, so it works both ways. Yes, we have massive bills, we're trying to offset them, but we're also trying to give something back to the supporters and the people in the local areas to go with that.
Just conscious of time, sorry. Yeah, we just, I don't actually know what time it is. Okay, so we should have finished half an hour ago, so we probably need to wrap up shortly. Just show of hands, how many people want to ask a question? Okay, so the challenge is, can we have some quick questions and some concise answers?
Okay.
I'm getting that, okay, let's go.
This one's for James more than anything else. So I'm a second year media student and aspiring to be a sports journalist, I guess. I was just wondering if there was anything in particular that I could get ahead of the game with, or work experience that I need to be looking for.
Talk to the local newspaper, talk to the radio station. It depends on where. Have a chat with me afterwards as well, to keep it very concise. But what I would say is I've noticed in the last couple of years, I think professional radio stations are looking for new talent, and I think they're looking for new voices and new people to be the next commentator, the next reporter. And I think maybe there was 5 or 6 years ago, it's harder to break through that wall, if you like. But I'm seeing it certainly growing and certainly getting better. So, and also, use the great thing about social media now is we're contactable. You can get in touch, you can hit me up with a DM whenever you want, and I will reply. If I can't give you the answer, I'll give you someone who can. And just hopefully reach out to people who I hope will be accessible and give you the answers, or give you the names and the kind of information that you're looking for. Don't be frightened of asking questions.
There we go, folks. Hit him up with the DM.
For Frankie and Ben, what are the current and future growth areas within coaching and performance that students just starting out on their degrees should be paying attention to?
Nice question. question.
For me, it would be in the psychology space. I think that that's a huge part of the game that can still really move forward. I think that I think of the journey that sports science has been on in the last 15 years. It's incredible, really. And you just look at the athletes that you see now playing the game, whether that's in the men's game or the women's, like they're absolutely, highly tuned athletes. The game's getting quicker, and that's generally because of people like Frankie's work in the last, like I said, 10 or 15 years. And I think that journey has been the same. We mentioned it before in terms of the evolution of analytics and data and all of that sort of stuff. I think that psychology and the whole sort of personal development, the mental side can still go on that journey. So for me, that would be a big area of focus that I think is going to be prominent in the next decade.
Yep, I'll be concise.
Thanks.
So I think, yeah, definitely what Ben said. I think sports science has been around for a number of years now. It's commonplace. I think the mental side, the well-being side is something that's going to be at the forefront of people's minds. Certainly if you look at what's going on in USA, they tend to be a little bit ahead of us. That's certainly where they're concentrating their time. And I think also the women's side of the game. Women, or female athletes, should I say, very different to male athletes. I think getting to know what works for females would be a good place to start. Someone maybe to get in contact with would be Dawn Scott. She's done a lot of work with female footballers, USA and England national team. Currently just got a job with Washington Spirit, available on Twitter and things like that. So people like that try and get in touch with professionals that are working in those areas now.
Can you hit her up with a DM as well?
Hit her up, yeah.
Excellent. Right, where are we? Sorry, Dave, I made you make you feel self-conscious.
Right to you, there we are.
I liked it. Hit me up to the end. Put it on a business card. I'm here for that. Right, do we... Yes. Oh, sorry, we've got one just there. Sorry.
Firstly, I would like to thank all of you for such an engaging discussion. I would like to ask Ben, last year there was like a huge controversy, I would say, about the formation of the Super League, which with Arsenal, along with the 6 other clubs in the UK, they wanted to form, and it was there was a massive backlash. I want to ask, what was the thinking within the club? And I think this question might be irrelevant for you, but what was the thinking behind that decision wanting to form the Super League? And I would like to ask Frankie and Liam, I know you guys are not in the Premier League right now, but you have definitely ambitions to be in the Premier League sometime soon. What were the feelings inside your clubs that when the 6 major clubs in the UK wanted to go away and completely destroy the footballing structure?
I did encourage them to ask harsh questions, so here we are.
For a while there, I was wondering what your personal view on it was, and it definitely revealed it at the end. So look, for me, easy answer, because honestly, it wasn't something that was discussed in a club. It was literally a decision at ownership level, which in our case, is a private family in America that own the majority of our club, and it was literally a decision made at the highest level. It wasn't discussed internally. So honestly, I don't know. Having sort of had conversations post-event, I think a lot of it was about, there was massive hesitancy around it and a lot of sort of uncertainty, but I think that it boiled down in the end to almost a fear of, okay, if this does go, basically it was a decision of what's going to be worse. If this goes ahead and Arsenal aren't part of it, or, that was the decision really. It was almost out of fear of, we don't want to not do something and then we're stuck out of it, and it's the way that the game's going to go. So, that certainly, it was a mistake, and I think the club have been public in sort of admitting that, but I think it was more born out of a sort of fear of although we're unsure, we just don't want to miss out on where the game could end up going and we're left out. That was probably a big part of it.
You can probably guess my thoughts on it as well from that perspective, talking about grassroots. And for me, the pyramid's the best bit about, with the home football, Sheffield in particular, we find out about that as a club, we're trying to do commercial deals, and the fact that you can play anywhere up to sort of stage 9, stage 10, and you're still playing a decent standard of football in this country. is massive. And to cut that off with the European Super League would just literally take away pretty much everything that's gone. Someone mentioned earlier on about the FA, thank you with the FA Cup run, that magic of the FA Cup and playing, you can play for, I don't know, North Ferriby, Bridgetown, and you play in that FA Cup. That's what it's about. I know that's not necessarily the pyramid system that gets you into the league, but how could you taking away football from the masses, in my opinion there. But like Ben says, there's business to everything. We're in an event called the business of football. People do have to make decisions. Do I sit here and think that will never happen? Absolutely not. I think it will rear its head again at some stage. Hopefully not, but I think it will. Would I ever vote for something like that? Absolutely not, because that Leicester City winning the Premier League, that Bournemouth getting to the Premier League, that's what football's about for me, and the fact that the game you play at one level can go all the way through is so important. And if I was ever lucky enough to be employed by someone like one of the big six, that would be my opinion. Whether the owners and the boards push back and tell you this is what we're doing is a different conversation, but whether we can keep football as it is, and that's not saying don't move football forward, because we should always try and do that, but that Super League for me would have been a car crash, and I'm glad it didn't happen.
I've not really got a lot to add. I think just the only thing is the conversations, I guess, within the club more from not more from like the general conversations that happen, players, staff, it would have been a real shame. And I think when you talk about clubs wanting to get to the Premier League, certainly Middlesbrough are a club that have got aspirations to get back to the Premier League. And the first fixtures you look for would be your Arsenal, Man City, Man U. So I think it would have been a real shame for our game and for the country if that wasn't possible.
So what I think I've learned is that the panel can't be particularly concise. So I think we need to be a little bit more strict. How many did we have? One in the middle here, Nikki, if you wouldn't. Perhaps the way that we should do this is if you can keep your arm up, then you get to answer a question. And if your arm collapses, then I'm afraid you're out. Does that seem reasonable? We'll try it. Okay, Nikki.
An endurance contest.
Absolutely.
So this is for Ben, Frankie, and Liam. Yeah. So it's about the emotional parts of football. So I know Ben is a Sheffield fan. I don't know if Frankie and I know Ben is Liam is an Arsenal. Liam is a Sheffield fan. Frankie and Ben, I don't know, but I'm a very emotional football fan. So would you advise me to work for the club I support, given that I might be very emotional in terms of making decisions, or would I be better off working for a completely different club?
I'll go first. Being a Sheffield Wednesday fan and working for Sheffield Wednesday is one of the best experiences of your life, but also one of the worst, because when we win, it's amplified by about 100 times. When you lose, you're pretty much at rock bottom, to the point where literally I have to try and detach myself away from it. So the concise answer to your question is I would try and work for a club that you didn't support, because then it will still always mean something to you. I'm passionate about any job you do, you should always do it to the best of your ability and be proud of what you do. But I don't think it matters just as much if you're working for a club that you don't support. That said, I might change in years to come if I go and work for a different club, but it's fantastic to work for the thing that you love and you believe in, but it doesn't have to give you a kick in when you don't win. So I would say, if you can, learn your trade somewhere else, and when you perfect it, then go back and show them what you can do once you're at the top of your game.
For me, it would depend on the role that you have in that club, because I think if your sort of fandom influences your decision making and makes you make emotional rash decisions that maybe can be to the detriment of your club, then obviously it's not good for you or the club. But if you're in a role where there's enough separation, where your kind of mood isn't going to necessarily adversely impact the work that you do, then I think it can be a really good thing. So for me, it depends on the role that you sort of fulfill at the club.
So I say I am a Hull fan. I was a Hull fan. I'm not really sure where I sit with it anymore, but I work for Hull as well. So I've worked for Hull. I was a Hull fan. I grew up in Hull. My advice would be probably to try not to work for the club that you support. It is my honest answer. I think it's nice to still have that passion away from work if you're a fan of a club.
Thanks, Nikki.
Hello. My question is for Ben. I'm sure you've got some situations whereby some players are quite surplus to requirements based on tactics or coach preference or something. So yeah, my question is, how do you handle situations whereby a player might just refuse to go on loan?
Yeah, it's a good question because it happens a lot. Sometimes it's not refusing to go on loan. Sometimes it might be that they want to go somewhere else over where we want them to go. The simple answer to that is that ultimately it's a collaboration. It's in football, to make any kind of player trade happen, you need to have consensus between three parties. You need a buying club, a selling club, and then a player. And all of those kind of parties need to be aligned. And to be honest, it's even deeper than that, because then even within each of those areas, you have multiple sort of people involved. So on the player's side, for example, you'll have a player, then you'll have a player's agent, and you might have the player's father or uncle or brother, family members that ultimately will have a say or want to have a say and influence as well. So it's quite a convoluted process that needs a lot of collaboration and streamlining to get anything done. Sometimes it's compromise. That's what it is with any relationship, I suppose. It's like, in a relationship that you might have with a partner, you have to find consensus and agreement, and that's what it is. Sometimes we'll have something that we would like them to do. We think it'd be good for you to go on loan here for these reasons, and we'll present that and discuss it and try and give them our rationale. But ultimately, you have to find compromise, and hopefully through that process they come on board, but sometimes they don't, and then we have to try and pivot to an alternative sort of option. So I'd say it's just like any relationship, compromise is key in communication.
How many, is this last one? Okay, last question, thank you guys.
All right, so my question is I'm graduating as a clinical exercise physiologist. So what sort of opportunities I can get from a club? I want to pursue my career in a sporting club, like a football club, specifically for Arsenal, because I'm an Arsenal fan.
Sorry, what were you graduating in?
Clinical exercise physiology.
Oh, yeah. Okay. To be honest, Frankie's probably best placed to answer this. But what I would say is, given the journey that the industry's been on in that specific field, there's more opportunities now than there were when Frankie was starting out, to be honest. Departments are a lot bigger. It's a hugely important function in any football club now, all the way through from working with young kids. The way in which we support them from an athletic development perspective is key. So those departments are a lot bigger. There's more roles available now. It used to be sort of 10, 15 years ago that the further down the pyramid you went, that some clubs didn't have anyone that was kind of doing, working in that kind of area. That's just not the case anymore now. Even down to sort of grassroots and non-league and semi-professional, they'll often have somebody that's doing that, and that just shows where it's gone. So I think the good news is that there's more opportunities than ever, and then it just goes back to some of the things that were said before about building links, building relationships with local clubs, contacting people, trying to find out if there's any paid internships, anything that you can do to try and increase both your skill set in an applied setting, but also your network is key. So that would be certainly kind of where I would say to focus.
Yeah, so I did an internship at Southampton, and I actually sent letters out, which shows how long ago it was, but I actually wrote letters and sent them out to many clubs. Southampton were the only one to get back, and that's how I kind of got my foot in the door in the industry, really. What I'd say is, what year are you in, sorry? Yeah, what year, sorry? You're graduating out, right? So my advice would be look now. So I think this week I've already seen Southampton have put out for their internship programme. I think they take on maybe 8. It's paid at about £600 a month, which covers your living expenses, and the experience you'll get there in that year will be unbelievable. So I think just look now. I just think Middlesbrough, as an example for myself, we just went through interviews last week. So I think the time is now. You need to be looking. UK Sport, Twitter, just trying to think some of the other ones, Bases. They're probably the main ones. FMPA maybe, jobs in football. So start to look on these sites now, because the clubs that have a good internship programme will be recruiting right now.
Right, so I think I'm going to be really harsh now and say that we are done with the questions. All that remains really for me to say is thank you all for coming. I think it's been a really enjoyable discussion. I hope you'll feel that you've had good access and a really good insight into what our panellists have been able to share with you. Just a reminder again, if you've enjoyed yourself this evening at this free event and you feel so inclined to support us and enable us to continue to do the positive work that Sophie's done with Football Unite's programme, then please do consider supporting us via either the QR code or via some old-fashioned cash in the buckets on your way out. Every single penny goes towards the project, and it really does help to change lives through football, which you're all clearly very passionate about because you're all here this evening. So thank you all for coming, and one final round of applause for our panellists. I think we're going to very awkwardly stay here because the photographer wants us to take a picture, but that doesn't mean that you all have to sit staring at us. Please, you're free to go. Enjoy the rest of your refreshments. Thank you for coming. And yeah, stay in contact with the alumni events. Thank you.